All right, let's talk about France. Because right now, France is a country of two minds, a real paradox at the heart of Europe. On one hand, you've got Paris, the glittering capital of luxury. But look just beneath the surface, and you'll find a nation that's quietly sinking under this massive weight of debt, division, and, well, decline. So today, we're going to break down France's silent economic crisis. And this really shows you what I mean. These are the two Frances, existing side by side. In Paris, you got this incredible prosperity. We're talking 75 billion euros in luxury exports every single year, thanks to giants like LVMH and Chanel. But then you step outside the capital, and it's a completely different story. You find these old industrial towns just struggling to get by, with unemployment rates over 15% and infrastructure that's just falling apart. It's really a tale of two completely different worlds in the same country. So this huge contrast, this divide, it's really just a symptom of a much, much bigger problem. And that problem can be summed up in one absolutely staggering number: 3.4 trillion euros. That's trillion with a T. That is France's public debt. And what's crazy is that it has tripled in just the last 25 years. To put that in perspective, the interest payments alone on that debt now cost more than the entire budget for universities and research. Just think about that. And, the really wild part is, this isn't a new thing. This isn't some recent crisis. It's a habit, a really, really long-term one. For over 51 years now, every single year since 1974, the French government has spent more money than it brought in. Every single year. And after decades and decades of borrowing to fill that gap, well, the bill is finally coming due. Okay, so let's play doctor for a second. What's the diagnosis for this economic illness? Well, it's not just one thing you can point to. It's more like a three-headed crisis. And the scary part is that each of these heads, each of these problems is feeding the others. It's creating this perfect storm. Let's start with crisis number one, which is arguably the most urgent of them all: demographics. To put it bluntly, France is literally running out of young people, running out of workers. The entire foundation of its generous social system, the idea that a big productive workforce pays for the pensions and healthcare of the retired, that foundation is starting to crack, big time. And I mean, just look at how fast this is happening. It's wild. Just over a decade ago, France actually had the highest fertility rate in all of Europe. They were at 2.0 children per woman. Today, it has plummeted to just 1.6, and it's still dropping. And this is all happening at the exact same time that the huge baby boomer generation is heading into retirement. You can see the problem here, right? And this has a massive direct economic consequence. Just check out this ratio. Back in 1990, you had 5 workers paying into the pension system for every single person who was retired. By 2010, that dropped to 3, and today, it's just 2. 2 workers supporting 1 retiree. The math just doesn't work. The system is becoming totally unsustainable. Okay, so that's the demographic bomb. Now let's add crisis number 2 to the mix, because this just makes everything worse. We're talking about the hollowing out of France's industrial base. And this isn't just about a few factories closing down. Nope. We're talking about the collapse of entire regional economies. I mean, look at this. Back in 1980, manufacturing was a huge pillar of the French economy. It made up more than a quarter of the entire country's GDP. Today, that share has been sliced in half, down to a measly 13%. And that decline has been way steeper than in most other developed countries. It's a massive shift. So you gotta ask, why? Why did all those factories leave? Well, it really boils down to this. French labor is the most expensive in the Eurozone. For every euro a company pays in salary, they have to pay about 50 cents more in taxes and social charges. Compare that to Germany, where it's around 30%, or Poland, where it's like 20%. For big companies like Michelin or Renault, the math was simple. They just left. And that brings us to the third head of the crisis. And this might be the most frustrating one of all, because it's the one that stops them from fixing the other two. We're talking about political paralysis. The French government is just stuck, completely gridlocked. They're unable to pass the big, tough reforms needed to fix these massive problems. And this chart of the French parliament really tells the whole story. It's totally fractured. You've got 5 different competing political blocs. And get this, the far left and the far right, together, they control over half the seats. So trying to build a stable majority to get anything done, it's pretty much impossible. There's no room for compromise. It's just gridlock. And what you get is this toxic and honestly super predictable cycle. It's like watching the same movie over and over. Step 1, the government suggests a reform that's really needed but is going to be painful, like raising the retirement age. Step 2, like clockwork, the unions call for massive protests in the streets. Step 3, political support just shatters under the pressure. And Step 4, the reform gets watered down into nothing or just abandoned completely. And nothing ever gets fixed. All right, so now we see the three big problems. But here's where it gets really dangerous. These three crises, demographics, industry, and politics, they aren't separate issues. They're all locked together in this vicious, self-reinforcing cycle where each one just makes the others worse. Just think about it for a second. Let's connect the dots. You can't fix the pension crisis caused by demographics without reforming the labor market, right? But you can't reform the labor market if you don't have a strong industrial policy to create new, good jobs. And you can't get that industrial policy without major tax reform to make France competitive again. But the political gridlock we just talked about, it blocks every single one of those steps. It's a catch-22. Everything is connected and everything is completely stuck. So why are we talking about this right now? What's the big deal? Well, it's because the bill is finally coming due. For the first time in a very long time, the global financial markets, the people and institutions who lend France all that money, they're starting to get seriously nervous. And this number right here is proof, 3.2%. Now, what is that? In simple terms, it's the interest rate France has to pay to borrow money for 10 years. And at 3.2%, it's the highest it's been since the really scary days of the Eurozone debt crisis back in 2012. That is a massive warning sign from investors. See, for years, the markets basically treated French debt as being almost as safe as German debt. And Germany is like the gold standard for safety in Europe. But now, that gap between their borrowing costs, what they call the spread, is getting wider and wider. And that signals one thing: risk. Investors see more risk in France, and that's costing the country billions more in interest every single year. And here's the real irony in all of this. France was one of the main countries that designed the Eurozone's budget rules in the first place. And now they're the biggest offender. They are blowing past the official EU limits on how much debt they can have and how big their deficit can be. We're talking a deficit of almost 6% when the limit is 3, and debt over 110% when the limit is 60. It's a real threat to the stability of the whole euro system. So, the politics are a mess, the economics are a mess. Is there any way out of this death spiral? Well, if the political solution is impossible, maybe, just maybe, the answer isn't political at all. Maybe it's technological. Let's just reframe the whole problem for a second. The two core issues, right, are a shrinking workforce and really low productivity. So what if you could solve those two problems without having to fight these massive political battles over reforms that everyone hates? What if you could just inject a massive productivity multiplier directly into the economy? And that is where robotics comes into the picture. We're seeing companies developing solutions that seem almost perfectly designed to fix France's specific problems. You've got bipedal robots like Digit from Agility Robotics that can work in warehouses, tackling the logistics and labor shortage issue. You've got general-purpose robots like Apollo that could help bring manufacturing back, and really cool models like robotics as a service that make all this advanced tech affordable even for small businesses. It's a potential game changer. Because make no mistake, the stakes here are incredibly high. This quote really captures the bleak future that France is staring down if something doesn't change. France may become the very Britain it once mocked: old, poor, and toothless. Wow. So that leaves us with one final massive question. Can a technological revolution actually succeed where political evolution has so clearly failed? Or is it already too late?